So let's resume our discussion on nonlinear spaces and examples. Uh, some of you have expressed that things are going little slow and we may be doing only examples, but I feel it's crucial to know a lot of examples for anything that we want to study later. So today also we'll be spending little more time on some more examples of the nonlinear spaces. So we are discussing nonlinear spaces and number of examples. We started with finite dimensional Rn with a lot of norms, and then we also looked at LP spaces, and we also looked at uh, continuous functions on different kind of setup. Now I want to bring it to one example in the connection of C. Identify the following. I'll ask the question. Can you recognize that if I know LP, these are functions from natural numbers to complex numbers with certain conditions. And can you see that if I replace the natural numbers by a set of first n terms, let's say subset of n which is containing 1 to n, and can you recognize this Rn is a special case of those LP? Good. But why only 9? So if I'm considering all functions from natural numbers to C, and I ask certain condition, I want it to be bounded. If it is L infinity, I want it to be summable, all these conditions. So I'm just replacing the natural number n with a set containing n elements, say 1, 2, 3, 4, first n natural numbers. And you can see that these are all so you have to say what is f of 1, f of 2, f of 3, and f of n, which is same as saying I call this with the notation f of 1 as x suffix 1, f of n as x suffix n. So it actually tells you what is x1, x2, xn. And the condition on that translates into your Rn. Okay. So identify that. So this Rn is some kind of special case of LP, depending on what kind of n that I am taking. And can you also see that LP itself is some special case of the C that you already done? I'm clearing it up. So if I consider all continuous functions from natural numbers, then C of x is what we generally wrote. This you cannot define some norm and then we put CB. But right now you look at C of x. If my x is just a natural number with discrete topology, then you already know that any function is continuous. So if f is a function from x to r, then it's actually a sequence. And now you can ask, if I put b, if I consider CB of x, it means you want the values range of f has to be bounded, which is same as saying your f of 1, f of 2, f of n, and for any natural number, the f of n has to be bounded, which is same as saying your L infinity. Are you able to recognize this part? Good. Now here comes the question, and that think a while and then answer. Can you see that? Can you recognize or realize Rn with Supnam as some CB of X? Is my question clear? So can you recognize Rn with Supnam, some CE of X? Only 2? Yeah. Atanu, what is the X?
So X can we write like n tuples, like 1 to n.
Yeah, X is the n tuples. Okay. And then the boundedness will give you this.
We don't need actually to put up B. It's obviously bounded because the domain is finite sets.
Correct. So it is only finite set, so you can always have the maximum. So in this case, that's clear, because if my X is, topologically, if X is compact, then CBX is same as CFX, that we have already seen. And hence, if I take X as just 1, 2, 3 to n, you can actually recognize this. And hence, in particular, if I take X to be just singleton, you can recognize R. And now this is a philosophical question. Can you see that why this course has to be called as functional analysis? Though the elements are vectors, sequences, still you can actually realize them as functions. So even a real number I can understand as a function. Take some 10-15 seconds and reflect upon this. See, is it conveyed? If you are done, then say yes. This part. So the point is that in some sense, even a real number, I can understand it as a function. It's a continuous function from singleton to real value. A real valued function whose domain is just singleton. That's what R is recognized as the models. So though we say it is analysis of functions, that's called functional analysis, we are actually including everything. We try to see everything as functions. Something that is, if you could recollect, this is what in your physics, they say that it has both particle nature and wave nature. So everything you can understand as a point, also as a wave means as a function. So it's a kind of realizing anything as a function. Okay, so let's go ahead. Now so now I'm restricting myself to something very special. So take X to be compact T2 space. Though it is not necessary, I'm just avoiding. So for the abundance of a lot of functions, if you've done topology, it will be clear why we are considering compact Hausdorff space. Okay. And if I'm considering the C of X, compact space, and if you are not familiar with these compact Hausdorff space, think of in the background, I'm considering a closed interval, closed and bounded interval in R. A and B are finite. Now we have already defined a subnorm here. Now my question is, can we define in some sense one norm? Yeah, we have started this actually doing. I'm asking you to define any element. Here is some function. I want to define the one norm. Vivek, what was the one norm in? Okay, Jayant has answers. Yeah, Jayant.
Sir, if domain is finite, then it would be the summation of mods of f
Correct.
of x.
No, now I am restricting x as this. So if you know a general compact algebra space, we will call it as x. Otherwise, specifically, let us consider the closed interval AB.
Then I think it will be integral of mod of fx.
Yeah, so this we have already done. Good, Giant. So I have to take integral of this a to b in this case. And if you don't want, you can consider this to be, in general, if you want to consider, it is integral over the x. Okay, whichever is comfortable to you, right? But we have already observed that there is some issue with this. We want a non-negative number, so obviously we'll include this modulus value. And now I want you to quickly check. Within few seconds, you must be able to say that is it a norm? And if you are checking, then tell which part of the definition is easy or all are easy. Yeah, Sampath, Vinay.
Sir.
Yeah. So what are you checking? What are the things are easy?
We can check linearity first.
Linearity of
Non-negative.
okay.
Non-negativity of the norm.
That's clear.
And we
is
can
it clear?
check. We can easily check the triangular inequality.
Okay.
And
from what it follows?
Integral like.
So you have to start with the integral norm f plus g.
Yes.
So it will be integral of modulus of f of t plus g.
F of t plus g of t.
Correct.
So when we split each of them into mod of f of t plus mod of g of t.
Will it be equality or inequality?
It will be an inequality. Sir.
We get inequality. Okay. Yeah. And so from what is this follows? If you know the term, it's fine. Otherwise, it's okay. So you're using the inequality, triangle inequality of the modulus, and
yes,
then
sir.
you are also using monotone property of the integral.
Yes.
If integral of f plus g is equal to integral of f plus integral of g. Okay. Right. So you use that fact, and then you will be able to get the triangle inequality. What about homogeneous, positive homogeneous? Multiplying by a scalar, that also comes out.
Yeah.
That's an integral property. Right. Okay. So what about definiteness?
If norm of f of x is 0.
No f of x now. Norm of f only. F of x becomes
norm
a real
of
number.
f is 0,
Hmm.
then integral a to b f of t dt mod is
Zero.
also 0.
Correct.
So basically it means summing up modulus terms at an interval of dt each.
Hmm.
So each of the term as f of t dt is positive, modulus of f of t dt.
Hmm.
So each of the term must be positive. As norm of f is 0, each term of it must be 0. So f of t must be 0
Is it so?
because there's a modulus.
Correct.
Each term must be greater than or equal to 0.
Okay.
The sum is equal to 0, so each of the term must be 0.
How do you get that each of the term is 0? It's
Because
intuitively
every
you're thinking. Intuitively you're thinking, but from where do you get that?
because it's an absolute summation, each of the terms must be 0. There's a modulus, right? So
Mhm.
each of f of t must be greater than or equal to 0.
This is intuitive idea, but that's not the rigorous proof. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Sampath. That's fine. So I urge you to check that. This is an intuitive idea that you are saying, but what really matters is that do you want the function to be continuous, Sampath, in this case?
Yes, I think.
If it is not continuous, can it be non-zero? I mean, to get the conclusion, do you really need a continuity of the function f? Because f you are taking from c of x. Without continuity also, still the result will be true?
Yes, I think. I'm not sure.
Not sure. That's fine. So it's not true if it is not continuous. Okay. So all that you need to use the fact is that suppose the function, if you want to conclude this continuous function is 0, and if it is not 0 at a point, you have to use the fact. So if f is non-zero at a point, in a small neighborhood around that, the function is still non-zero. Okay. And since the function is non-zero in a small neighborhood, in that place, the integration will be strictly positive. You have to use all those facts to conclude this. So I'll leave this as an exercise, and this is what you are going to submit. Okay. So I just want you to say, prove that if the integral of f is 0, then f is 0. That means if one norm of f is 0, then f is 0. Is the question clear? Just in one A4 sheet, you can write this proof, and you can, I'll send a link possibly there you can upload it. Okay, so what you need to prove is if norm of f1 is 0, then f is equal to 0. By f is 0 means f of t is 0 for each t. Okay. And if f is coming from c of x. Right, a rigorous proof. Right. So that gives you the definiteness, and you get norm on the space. And so I can very well write, I can include the list that if I consider with one norm is actually a non-linear space. The case is same with even if I consider X compact Hausdorff with right. And very recently, again, those who have done a course on measure theory, I just want to ask a similar question. The same integration can we also define for measurable functions. Okay, so X is some measurable space, and you have a sigma algebra and a measure. Now I want to ask the same question, that can I define, so I'll consider all the functions. Now there is no continuous functions, so I'm collecting all the functions from X to R, which are integrable functions. Okay. And I asked the question, so consider the set of integrable functions with respect to this measure space, and I just want to ask the same question. And of course you will give the same expression. Now in this case it is over X, and this you will consider F. Instead of F, of course you have to take mod F, and with respect to the measure. Okay, this is how we define this. And now I just want you to identify here also if you could recognize all the properties, if you could recollect all the properties of the integration, that will help you to conclude it's non-negative, and then by monotone property again, and you can conclude positive homogeneous. That means if I multiply by alpha, mod alpha comes out. That comes from the integration factor that you learned. And if I look for the triangle inequality, that also follows from the monotone property of the integration. Now the only crucial thing remains to be checked is that the definiteness. That means if the norm of F1 is 0, is the F1 0? So what about norm of F1 is 0, implying F is equal to 0? Is it true in this case now? By the way, the function f0 means at each point its value is 0. So what we can think. Okay, some of you could recognize there is a problem. So how do we get a function which is non-zero but the norm, one norm of f is 0? Namachivaya?
So we can take the equivalence relation. Like
No, I'm saying that can you think of a function which is non-zero but the norm of f1 is 0?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Like we can take characteristic function on a rationalness.
Okay. So all that. So can I consolidate or say that you take a set of measures 0 on which you define whatever you want? Means non-zero.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that's the idea. So you can get that. Okay. So you cannot get this. So somehow we have to look for. So this such as it is, there is a problem. This is the first problem. In fact, the more serious problem is that what is the meaning of saying that f equal to 0? Okay. So it's not clear whether we can call f equal to 0 because this function is not even defined at each point. There is an almost everywhere sense. So the better way to expect is f is equal to 0 almost everywhere, which means on a set of, except on a set of measures 0, this function is 0. And this problem and the assignment problem has a connection. If the function is continuous, then the set of points where the function is not equal to 0 cannot be a set of measure 0. In the very specific case of subset of AB, if at a point if it is non-zero in a small neighborhood it will be non-zero, that neighborhood will have a length as a Lebesgue measure, and that creates the problem here. And in the case of C of x, so that non-zero set measure will help us to conclude that the integration also has to be non-zero. Okay. So for those who are have difficulty in following all these things, I just want to draw one small picture and then see that whether you can make sense. I'm making very specific case. So I have this in the interval. At some point C, the function is non-zero. If this function is non-zero, then I'm sure that since the function is non-zero, I can find out a small, since it is non-zero, it has to be something like this, even if it is zero everywhere. So I can find out a small interval around C. On this, the function will be everywhere it is strictly positive. In fact, you can find out a lower bound if I consider this will be some C dash and D dash. So inside that C dash D dash interval, the function has to have a value bigger than, strictly bigger than some number, and so the integral will be at least this much, this positive quantity. And that creates the contradiction in the case of connected to the assignment. And in the same way, at this point, if the set of that gives you the idea of what happens, what goes wrong in the case of integration. Yeah, Datta and Mohan. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you want to say something?
No, sir, I didn't raise.
Okay. No, there was no. Okay. And hence, so this is a standard thing. So whenever you are defining, naturally thinking that some norm will work out, but it may not work out as we think. It might create a problem with the definiteness. So all such cases we have already done. In measure theory, you might have done. We completely avoid this by considering some kind of equivalence classes, or what under the C almost everywhere sense. So what it means is that except on a set of measure 0, if they differ and we don't consider them to be different, we will consider them as same. Okay, so F is equal to G almost everywhere, which means that whatever you have learned, so set of all points such that f of x differs from g of x. So this set's measure is actually 0. So this is what the meaning is. And we create an equivalence relation. So f is equivalent to g if this happens. And one can check this is actually an equivalence relation. And in that case, if you start defining this as the norm, so if you define this as the norm, then you will get whatever we want to control. So this is f equal to 0. In fact, the real meaning at that case, it becomes f is 0 almost everywhere. So at this, and a set of measure 0, if the functions differ, they are not actually different, they are same. And with whatever we have discussed so far, is it also clear? Tell me the following. So if f belongs to, so the equivalence classes I will denote by this, and soon we will drop this with the understanding. Suppose if I have f is in the equivalence class of G, okay, and I know a little extra that f is continuous. Note that I am I am in an integrable function and I consider the equivalence class of G. I took a function f and I'm saying that f is continuous. Okay. Suppose with these assumptions, suppose h is also continuous. So h is continuous and h also belongs to the same equivalence class of G. Of course, that will be same as saying that equivalence class of f. Once you understand this definition, because equivalence class are if G is related to h and G is related to f, then h will be related to f also. So use the transitivity to get this. Okay. Now I want to ask the following question. What can we comment about f and h? So though I wrote it many things, just to understand what I said. Suppose if I have two continuous functions in an equivalence class, what can you comment about those functions f and h? So what is the underlying set? Now my x is now subset of R if you want to consider, and your Lebesgue measure case. So I'm asking a very specific instant. Say f and g are Lebesgue measurable, and their f and h are continuous functions, and they are Lebesgue measurable, and they belong to the same equivalence class. Then what can I comment about f and h? Is the question clear first of all? Say yes or no. Those who have not done measure theory will have a trouble, but so just quickly go through a typical Wikipedia page of measure theory to get hold of it. Yeah, so the question is clear. And how many of you think you have answer? Yeah, I'll ask. Any more? Sampath, you're saying no? Yeah, Piyush?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so what's the answer?
The f equal to h.
Yeah, so we want to conclude that this implies f is equal to h. Okay. Again, the reason is the same thing, whatever we did. If f and h are differing at a point and both of them are continuous, in a small neighborhood, they should be far away. And use that to conclude that they cannot be in the same equivalence class. Means on a set of, you can find out a small interval around that point where f and g are far away. So that small interval has positive measure. So in the set of positive measure, they are different. Hence, they cannot be in the same equivalence class. So what it concludes is that if at all there is any continuous function in an equivalence class, it will be unique. Is that clear? Say yes if you got it. Good. So note that it's not necessary that in every equivalence class there will be a continuous function. Okay. If at all there is a continuous function, and it's going to be unique. So if I know in the equivalence class there is a continuous function, there's nothing wrong in writing f of x or h of x because they are going to match everywhere. Okay. So if I am representing an equivalence class with a continuous function, I can always write f of x. There is no problem. Is this point clear? Good. Okay. So take time to understand this. We may not be able to get such a continuous function always, but if at all, I'm assuming There is a continuous function, so I can go ahead with the f of x. There is no problem. So point-wise, the function is defined.
Sir, one small doubt.
Yeah.
Sir, in the previous example, like when you define c of x, we take the x to be, I mean, Hausdorff, compact Hausdorff, right? Like, why we need that, sir?
Which one?
This one.
The compact Hausdorff?
Yes.
No, compactness is clear.
Is like, anyway, whether x is a subset of R, sir? No, right?
No, nothing.
Then to define this integration, we need to define a measure on x.
Correct.
So then why this compact Hausdorff space helps us in defining that measure?
No, nothing. I am saying this for the sake of this is easy for you to understand. Otherwise, what I need to assume, if I take the integration of any function, it has to be finite.
Okay.
So the measure of the full set, you feel like should have a finite measure.
Yes, sir.
So compactness is 1 if you assume the regular measures.
Okay.
So for regular
then
measure
why we need Hausdorff?
So what is the benefit of Hausdorff? Otherwise, you may not have more functions. You cannot distinguish 2 points.
Okay.
So the space has to be sufficiently many, right? So that's the reason. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is, we'll be using number of times. See, you, for example, let's say the same argument I want to go ahead with the continuous function. If f and g are different, then at a point they differ. Then I need to say that f at that point is a different, f at x is a different value and g at x is a different value. I want to separate them by small intervals. Are you following, Namasivaya?
Yes, sir.
And now I look at what is the inverse image of those things under the f and g.
Okay.
And what guarantees that they have to get separated? Suppose the whole space is containing only one topology. It's a trivial topology, let's say.
Okay.
Then the inverse image of both of them is same set, I may not get a separation.
Okay.
So I need, somehow I should be able to separate in the codomain. I should be able to push back through the inverse image and separate them.
I mean, otherwise, if we don't have that, then many functions have the same integral, is it?
Yes. Okay, good. And hence now, with all this settlement, so whenever I'm considering the set of integrable functions, and very particularly maybe this whole thing continuous, everything we assumed under the Lebesgue case. So at least let us restrict ourselves. If I consider the Lebesgue measurable functions with the equivalence class, I can very well define this integration and it forms a nonlinear space. That's what you need to check. We have now almost checked everything excluding the definiteness and checkbox. So I'll write that. So the functions for which this has to be finite. Now, if my whole space is finite measure, then I'm fine. But if I don't have, then I may need to demand that as well. So for a general set, we call this as what is known as notation will be easy. So it is L1 space with the measure with the sigma algebra and the measure. So set of all. So this space so if is mu measurable. That's a standard definition, but we also want it to be, this norm should be a finite number, so I demand this. So I demand this integration of mod f dv. This is finite. And with all the discussion that we had, of course, when I'm considering this, now I am considering the equivalence classes. So this L1 with this now, one norm. I'm continuing to call this as one norm. So the context will make it clear. One norm of a sequence I am taking, or one norm of an element in Rn I am taking, or one norm of a function, integrable function I am taking. Okay. So this is a nonlinear space. Now the next question is that the moment I define something as 1, why not 1? Why only to 1? Can I ask general? So can I define norm P? So can I define for 1 we have already done. Is the choice clear, easy? What to be defined as? Same thing. So you look at integration. Only thing is that you appropriately raise it to the power p. So this is power p and is whole power 1 by p. So this is called the p norm of integrable function, and hence we can also define LP space. I leave it for you to write the definition. Only condition is that the last part of the condition, you want this to be finite. To the power 1 by p has to be finite, which is same as saying this itself is finite. And quickly go through the definitions, what will work out. So definiteness, you can get it. Non-negative, you can get it. Positive homogeneous also you will get it, because mod alpha power p will be there. When it comes out and take the pth root, it will get only mod alpha. So the triangle inequality I need to check, and hence can you see that we need a similar kind of triangle inequality what we have established for sequences. Is that clear? Right. And so that's the next thing that you can actually check. There is a equivalent held as and Minkowski inequalities. Okay. So the statement remains same with norm of f into g, with whatever it means, is less than or equal to norm f with p and norm g with q, and this will be norm f plus g is less than or equal to for any p norm. Of course, this 1 by p plus 1 by q equal to 1 is the standing for that kind of p and q. So I just want you to just reflect upon. I'm leaving this again for you to derive it. It's not at all difficult. Assuming the Young's inequality, we have deduced the Hilder's inequality for Rn and then for sequences. Do you remember what we did? if you remember, then what to be done here will be clear. We have took something like this. Do you remember? How many of you remember this? In the Young's inequality, we took this as A and this as B, and then this power P, this power Q, and multiplying this less than or equal to that. And then when you collect all the terms, that cancelled with this denominator power, and that side remained as only 1 by P plus 1 by Q, and so it is less than or equal to 1, and then take these two terms to the other side and you get what you want. Okay. So to prove this inequality now, what do you think you will be doing? Can you see that it is the same? But what is the what kind of difference it makes? Instead of this, what you will choose now, instead of xi, I'll clear it up. Instead of xi, what you will start with? If you get the idea, then just tell. If you have an idea, then say yes. Once you recognize that, then rest of the things are the same too. So remember, what is this norms now? So the f into g norm 1 means it is integration of ft dt, integration of f d mu over the space x. No answer? Nobody could get what do we want? Yeah, Tanu.
So we wanted to show that integration of mod fg is less or equal to norm of f plus into norm of g.
Yes.
So if you take that component mod f by norm of f and mod g by norm of g.
No, this one?
By yes.
Are you saying this?
Yes.
But here it was xi. So what you should take it on the numerator? What is this f? What was this xi? Just to understand, it is once you understand this ideas, it is simple. What is xi? It is actually f of I, correct?
Yes.
It's a function from natural numbers. So f of I is defined as x suffix I. So the domain thing, you have accumulated everything. So here the domain is x. So what you should start with? The denominator is fine. That's the norm of p. What will be the numerator?
Okay. We can start with f of x.
F of x. We can start.
Correct,
Yes,
correct,
f of
correct.
x.
That's all. So if I know the value at each of these points and then taking the continuous summation is the integration. Here it was defined only for the countably many times. So that's why it took continuous summation is just summation. Here it is become integration. That's all. So you need to take f of x by norm of p, and here you will take, if it is g, so g of x by. And use the same. So for each x, you can create such an who use the Holder's inequality to get something, and then now you need to do the integration and use the monotone property of the integration to control whatever that you want. Okay. Is that fine? Right. So once this is, once you recognize this what to be done, and it is immediate that how do you get Minkowski inequality from there also? Yeah. Is that also clear? The way that you derive the Minkowski from the holders, the same way you have to do. Okay, and hence you can see that. So these two things I will leave it for you to verify. It's not difficult. Maybe just as a kind of repeating. Dipanjana, can you tell how do you go from holders to Minkowski? What is the one important idea?
Sir, the same. We take f of x.
No, that is right. But what is the one idea which gave you Minkowski from holders?
Sir, the triangular inequality mod of f of x plus gx less equals to mod of f of x less than gx.
Okay. Okay, so remember this I said when I was emphasizing. Now this is f plus g norm p on the left hand side. So that p always you write as p minus 1 and 1. Split into two parts and consider this as a and that as b and then use the holders. Okay. So remember this. That's all. So you will be able to get the Minkowski inequality also. So once this Minkowski inequality you have, in fact, it proves this LP spaces are in fact vector spaces, all the LP including P equal to 1, and hence I can define that norm, and so you get a family of norm linear spaces. So LP space with the norm P is again a norm linear space. For what P? Including 1. How do we go about infinity? Can I define L infinity also? It is just in comparison. Compare always this with C of AB with P norms. Okay, C of AB with sup norm, you want it. But it's these functions are L infinity equivalence classes. So even on a set of measure 0, if they take infinite, it doesn't matter for us. You want bounded, but not everywhere. Excluding on a set of measure 0, if it is bounded, that's enough. Okay, so those kind of functions are called essentially bounded functions. So what is the meaning of f is essentially bounded? So f is essentially bounded. If what should happen? Let's say f is essentially bounded by say alpha, which means that if I correct all those x in the space x such that the places where f of x is strictly bigger than alpha, I mean the points where it is not below alpha, this set has to be measured. Is the definition clear? If I say that f is bounded in the case of c of x, then I want f of x has to be less than or equal to alpha for all x. But in the case of measurable functions, I am giving exclusion set. So this is an exclusion set. These are the points where the f of x is bigger than alpha. And that measure has to be 0. So this is saying that f is essentially bounded by alpha. And is it clear that if f is essentially bounded by alpha, f is essentially bounded by alpha plus 1 also? Yes? Right. And so it's clear that what is the best bound that I can think of. Okay, if there exist, so I collect all such alphas where this is true, and I look at the smallest. Okay. And this I will define as infinity norm of F. So it looks like a very complicated definition. It is the infimum of those alphas for which the function value is bigger than alpha is a set of measure 0. So except on a set of measure 0, the remaining elements are almost bounded by this essential bond. Okay, I will stop at this. So with this norm, you can check that it is also a norm linear space, and hence L infinity with this norm infinity is also a norm linear space.